The following is a conversation between me and Professor Dr. Jörn Müller Quade. Jörn earned his doctorate in the field of computer algebra at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in southern Germany. He fell in love with cryptography in 1999 at the University of Tokio, where he led the research program in quantum cryptography during his postdoctoral degree. After returning to Karlsruhe, he was head of junior research group on long-term security in cryptography and coordinated the EU project ProSecCo at the European Institute for System Security. In 2008, Jörn took over the chair IT Security at the Institute for Algorithms and Cognitive Systems at KIT. At the end of 2008, he was offered the professorship for IT security combined with the leadership of the Institute for Cryptography and Security at KIT. I have the privilege to call him my uncle, and I hope you can enjoy this conversation as much as I did. Let's get right into the episode. Hey Jörn, thanks for coming to the podcast.
Thank you for having me here.
So my first question is actually into your past. Could you explain to the audience what is the Chaos Computer Club and how were you involved in it?
Actually, it's totally different. The Chaos Computer Club is a very good organization looking at cybersecurity, but this is not how I came to cybersecurity. Actually, my way to cybersecurity was different. I was studying something more related to math, like solving equations. And then it was very difficult for me to get a postdoc position. So I was looking for a job. And then I found a job actually in Japan at an institute where they did cryptography. And so I got hooked coming from my solving equations to thinking about cryptography. And I think this is really a luxury position that I may do this now as a permanent job, thinking about cryptography.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So you already answered my follow-up question, how you got interested or how you ended up being interested in cryptography. Could you maybe explain to the audience first, what exactly is cryptography and why is it important in our everyday life?
Actually, most people have contact to cryptography when they surf in the web and they go to websites which have this HTTPS for secure connection. And there, the data flow is encrypted. So cryptography is mostly about encryption. But that's not all, because you also have to be sure that you're talking to the right person and not to, say, a man in the middle trying to get your information. And to solve this, actually, one needs digital signatures. And it's already fascinating that something like digital signature exists at all, that you can compute, say, a number, which is the number for this document, and everybody can check that only you could compute this number. And so you signed this document by releasing this number. And that's not where it stops. I think very, very fascinating is what happened in the late 20th century and in the last couple of years, that we are trying to compute on encrypted data, meaning we are trying to get the data protection by technical means, not just by contracts that you may not misuse my data, but in a way that I will hand out, say, to a cloud server, my data only in an encrypted form, and the service, some computations, can still be done on this encrypted data. And I think that's very, very fascinating.
Okay. Yeah, could you explain a little bit more? So from what I understood is cryptography is a way to communicate in a trustful manner over the internet. so to speak. So if you're having cryptography in the middle, then you can verify that, like you said, a certain document is issued by a certain party, and you can actually verify that mathematically, right? Maybe you can also integrate that and explain a little bit more about zero knowledge proofs, because that is a really important part, I feel like, as well, and a really important development in the cryptography area.
Actually, cryptography is mostly about establishing a secure connection. This has been the application of cryptography for thousands of years, mostly in the military. But in the internet now, we have a different use of cryptography. We're not connecting to someone we already know. So the interesting thing is how to connect to someone you don't know. How do you get a common secret? And this is fascinating in its own, that this is possible at all, to have, say, a key exchange where Alice and Bob have never met before, and they are able to establish a common key, which is then used for encryption. And how could you think that this is even possible? And I think there's a nice protocol, a nice explanation, which is not completely correct, but it's very illustrative. And for that, we think about the message or the key we would like to exchange being contained in a box. This box has two positions where you can lock it with a padlock. Alice wants to send this information, this message in the box, securely to Bob, but the messenger is not trusted. So what Alice does now is she inputs the message into the box, closes the box, and puts her padlock on the box. The messenger now carries the box to Bob. The messenger cannot open the box because the box is locked. Bob, unfortunately, cannot open the box either. But Bob will add his padlock. And then the messenger will carry back the box to Alice. Alice can remove her padlock and ask the messenger to carry it again to Bob. The untrusted messenger at no point of time can open the box. It's always locked. But then when it arrives at Bob's place, then Bob can remove his padlock, open the box, and obtain the key or read the message. So that's kind of an illustrative example that something like this might be possible at all. And you have now to replace the padlocks at the box by certain mathematical primitives like one-way functions and that. Interestingly, this protocol is not secure. Why is it not secure?
Okay.
Because the messenger will just take the box, add his padlock, carry it back to Alice. Alice will remove her padlock, and now the messenger can remove his padlock and read the message. This is what's called a man-in-the-middle attack. So one has not only to be able to encrypt the data, one has also to be able to authenticate the data, to be sure that, say, the padlock in this example indeed came from Bob and not from the messenger. And for this, digital signatures are used. Digital signatures allow you to, for a document, compute a number which serves as the signature, and everybody knowing your public key can check that the signature is valid, but only you, knowing some secret key, can generate this signature. And now one problem remains. How does Alice know what signature is the signature of Bob? Because they never met before. And for this, we use what's called certificates, meaning we have trusted authorities, and these trusted authorities, like my employer, signs that I am indeed employed at KIT and that this is my public key. And now you don't need to trust me anymore. You just need to trust my employer. But maybe you've never heard about KIT before. So then there's a layer of trusted authorities above that. They sign the keys for the certification authorities. And at one point of time, you're at the topmost level, and then you have to trust the United States or trust Germany. And with these certificates, you build what's called a public key infrastructure. Now I can verify that a certain public key is indeed your public key. And then I can use this to verify your signature. And then I'm sure that the message came from you. This is how it's done in the internet. You have these public keys, you have these certificates, and you can establish a secure connection if the certificates are valid and there. And now, this is what most people think cryptography is all about. It's about establishing secure connections, but there's more. The interesting thing, to my opinion, is whenever you have, say, two parties, Alice and Bob, and they don't trust each other. In the secure channel scenario, you had Alice and Bob, Alice trusts Bob, but there might be some eavesdropper or man in the middle. But in the case where Alice mistrusts Bob, things become more difficult and maybe more interesting. A favorite example of mine is coin tossing. Imagine we would disagree, and now we would like to flip a coin to settle this decision. Then we both would sit at the same table, maybe, we would flip a coin, and we would both see the result. But imagine now we were two parties, two computers say, separated over a long distance and only connected by a wire. You can imagine Alice and Bob being at different places and connected only via telephone. And now the question is, in this scenario, would it be possible to fairly flip a coin, even though Alice and Bob are only connected by a telephone line? I mean, the first naive idea is Alice flips a coin and tells Bob if he lost. But this is, of course, not really secure, because Alice could always tell Bob he lost, or Alice could flip two coins and then choose the outcome she likes more, or whatever. So this doesn't work. You might even be tempted to think that it doesn't work at all, because you could think maybe they exchanged some messages and there's one last message. And the last message either biases the coin, influences the coin, or it does not. If it influences the coin, then the sender of the last message has some influence on the coin. If it doesn't influence the coin, why sending this message? So it looks impossible, but it is possible. And for this, I need to tell you about a cryptographic primitive we did not talk about before, which is called bit commitment. A bit commitment you can think of as being kind of an encryption, but it has two properties. One property is it is hiding, meaning someone seeing the encryption cannot tell the message inside. That's quite normal for encryption. But the other property is binding, meaning there's only one unique way to open the message. Meaning if you encrypted heads, you can only decrypt heads. If you encrypted tails, you can only decrypt tails. And so let's imagine this bit commitment being a strong box which you can lock and the message is inside. Then I will tell you how to solve, given such a strong box as a commitment scheme, how to solve the bit flipping problem. We do it as follows. Alice flips a coin and writes down the result and puts it into the strong box, locks the box, and sends the box to Bob. Bob cannot open the box, doesn't know what's inside. This is the hiding property of the commitment. Then Bob flips a coin, tells Alice the outcome directly, and then Alice sends the key to the box to Bob. Bob opens the box and knows Alice's bit now. And now, if both bits are equal, Alice did win. And if both bits are not equal, Bob wins. And now, why is this secure? Because Alice, for example, cannot cheat. No matter what she puts into the box, she cannot know what Bob's random bit will be. And also, Bob cannot cheat, because if Bob could, with a certain probability, bias the bit to be, say, 1, then with this probability, he has to correctly guess the bit inside, because his message is the opposite. And so the hiding property is not given. So if we assume that it's hiding, then there's no way for Bob to send some message which is correlated to the bit inside. And now, coming back to what I said earlier, I earlier said it seems impossible, but now it's possible. And what about this last message? Why sending the last message? The last message was the key to open the box. And this does not influence the bit, but it proves to Bob that Alice did not change her mind. So the last message really does not influence the bit. Otherwise, Alice could influence the bit. But it serves as a proof that indeed Alice is telling the truth. The bit she committed to was that bit which Bob now learns. And there is more. You can do even more. And one thing you were already mentioning is zero knowledge proofs. That's also something very, very fascinating. If you think about what is a proof, then usually a proof is that you break down a mathematical argument into very elementary steps, which are very, very, very convincing. Step by step, you convince someone, and then he believes your statement. Say the statement is there are infinitely many prime numbers, or the statement is I know a digital signature to a certain document, which is also a mathematical statement. And now I would like to prove this without giving you the proof, because the proof might contain interesting information. The proof might contain the digital signature, which I would maybe not want you to learn. And now the question is, how can this be possible at all? To have a proof which convinces you, but it doesn't give you anything which you could not have made up by yourself. And the basic idea is to make proofs interactive. So an interactive proof means we are sending back and forth messages, and it's a little bit like in the coin toss example. In this coin flipping example, the last message was kind of like a proof that Alice did not make up a new bit, but actually did stick to the bit she committed before. And how can we think about interactive proofs? Let me give you a very, very simple example, again with physical analogs and not very much math. Imagine I would like to prove to you that Coca Cola is something different from Pepsi Cola. I'm not saying anything is better or worse, I'm just saying it's different. And now, how could I convince you that it is indeed different? I could convince you by something what's called a PEPSI test. Imagine you have 40 glasses, all look identical, then I will go out of the room. You will, at random, generate a 40-bit number where you can be sure that I will not guess it. And then if the first bit is 0, you put Coca Cola into the first glass. If the first bit were 1, you would put Pepsi there. And the same for the second bit, third bit, up to the 40th bit. And now I will re-enter the room and I will taste from each glass and write down if it's, to my opinion, Coca Cola or Pepsi, which I can distinguish only if there is a distinction, if they are not equal. Okay? If both liquids would be exactly the same, then the number you encoded into the glasses would be gone, because you would put liquid X in, not depending on 0 or 1, because both bottles contain the liquid X. But if they are not equal, then I will be able to generate your number. And you will be very impressed if I tell you your number, even though it's very, very, very unlikely for me to guess this number if both liquids were the same. And now, why should you be doing this? What's an application of zero-knowledge proofs? One application of zero-knowledge proofs is, for example, remote attestation, meaning you have a chip in your computer, and this chip belongs to your computer. It has a serial number, a name, and all that. And now some party would like to know that you have such a chip. Now it would be very easy to tell them, yeah, I have such a chip. I tell you everything about this chip, and this chip has even a public key and will sign messages. But that's not how it's done, because this would reveal who you are. At least it will reveal the name of your computer, and different connections or applications could then be linked, and we know, it's again this guy with this computer. And so what we would like to have is what's called remote attestation, and anonymous remote attestation. And what we do there is we use zero-knowledge proofs to actually convince someone that we have a correct hardware setup, we have this chip, but we don't reveal any personal data, meaning the name of this chip, which is the chip that belongs to you. That's why it's personal data. And there are more applications. So one is anonymous attestation. Another application is that if you have a very, very complicated protocol, cryptographic protocol, for, say, computing on secrets, then it might be that Alice and Bob are mistrusting each other. It might be that Alice thinks maybe Bob did some computations wrong. How do I know? And then you can use zero-knowledge proofs to convince Alice that you indeed correctly computed everything without revealing your secret input or your secret key or whatever. And so zero-knowledge proofs are something very, very fascinating. And it sounds impossible. Actually, it was invented by Goldwasser and Micali in, I think, 1982. And it took them years to get it published, because the reviewers of the paper always thought, that's strange. And so it took some time, but then it really changed the field. So if you look at how the security definitions in cryptography are done nowadays, modern cryptography, then they are all inspired by this idea of zero knowledge, that something remains secret if so to speak, all that's left after the protocol looks like something you could have made up yourself, something which would not convince a third party. And so very, very many modern protocols are now defined like zero knowledge. And that's very, very nice, because if you like this way of thinking around the corner, then cryptography is really fascinating.
Yeah, and there are many, many other real life examples where this technology could be useful, right? I mean, I always think of very basic examples. Let's say, for example, I'm going to a supermarket, right? And I want to buy liquor. And the cashier is asking, because I still look very young, is asking me for my age, if I'm allowed to drink that liquor. Through a zero knowledge proof, I can prove to her that I'm over 18, meaning the legal age of drinking in Germany. And if you're in the US, it's obviously 21. Without revealing my true age, because my true age might be my secret. Or your health data. If some insurance company wants to know you have a certain risk factor, you could reveal that secret. I bury that risk factor, or I don't bury that risk factor, without revealing all the other health data. Same with financial transactions. A company wants to know if you paid for your services. You can actually reveal that's without revealing your whole transaction data. For
Yep.
example, if we are going into a public blockchain right now, which we will a little bit pivot to a little bit now, because in a public blockchain, everything is totally visible, right? So zero knowledge proofs can actually help there a lot, facilitate these everyday life interactions. So the basic premise of cryptography, which I find really fascinating, is cutting out the trusted middleman. You can trust another party, like you said, Alice and Bob. They don't trust each other, but based on pure mathematics, they can trustlessly tell each other the outcome of a coin flip. Would you think that it makes sense to apply that in insurance data, for example, health insurance or something like that?
Thank you for the many examples. To make it very clear that you can, for example, prove your age, you have to turn it into a mathematical statement. And so, for example, it could be that your state digitally signs the data on your identity card. And then you would be able to prove your birth date by just showing your identity data and the digital signatures from the state. But it would be a lot better if you could keep your age as a secret, and then you have this mathematical statement that there is a valid signature for this data, and now you turn it into another mathematical statement, which is my birth date is smaller than this and that, which would then prove that you're at least 18 years old. And then you can use a zero knowledge proof to actually prove that this is true. But you also need this, for example, digital signature from the state, because otherwise proving your age would not be a mathematical statement. And whenever you can turn something into a mathematical statement, zero knowledge proofs can be applied. And if it's about data, you can prove medical data properties in zero knowledge, which is also very, very nice. And you were just pivoting to cryptocurrencies. And there you can think of lots of applications. And again, it is kind of fascinating that using math alone, it's possible to come up with a cryptocurrency which has value, which cannot be multiplied ad infinitum. Because if you would say the number 5 is now worth $1, then everybody would just copy the number 5 and try to pay with the number 5. So this wouldn't make sense. So what cryptocurrencies do is a lot more clever than that. Actually, what you do is that you have a ledger with very many accounts, and you kind of keep a consensus about who has how much money in the account. And you need a lot of privacy technologies to keep this anonymous, for example. And so cryptocurrencies are a novel way to use cryptography for something which you would have thought would be impossible before. And actually, it came as a surprise. A lot of people did not think in that direction before Bitcoin was published. And so it's actually a very fascinating idea, and it even had a huge market impact, such that lots of cryptographers left academia for lots of money to invent or analyze cryptocurrencies.
Yes, and there's also a really big field within cryptocurrency where they're researching zero-knowledge proofs.
Yep.
I took a quote from the Handbook of Digitalization, a German handbook of yours, where you gave an interview. And you said, quote, besides blockchain, there are many other cryptographic methods that are sometimes even more suitable for solving the problems for which blockchain is currently being proposed. In principle, one can imagine that all the tasks for which a trusted intermediary, such as an auctioneer, a notary, or a bank, is currently needed, could also solve by distributed cryptographic methods. So because I'm obviously into cryptocurrencies a lot, in the space a lot, and the mission statement is there, everything can be solved through a blockchain. So I want to actually indulge a little bit in another perspective. What are these other cryptographic methods that could be used to solve something like identity, insurance, financial currency?
I did say this, and I did not mean that there's a better way to cryptocurrencies, because cryptocurrencies are a very, very good application of the blockchain technology. But back then there was a hype, and there were several proposals. Like, for example, we could put all the exams and grades one has into the blockchain, and then you can check if someone really got a degree from, say, KIT or not. And that's not necessary, because KIT could be just digitally signing your certificate, your degree, and then you can go wherever you want when you apply for a job and tell them, I have a degree from KIT, look here, and there's the valid signature. So digital signatures solve this problem. So why do we need blockchains if digital signatures seem to do something very similar? And the reason is the following. If I give you a digital signature, I can prove that there's this digital signature and it is a message authenticated by whoever has this secret key and so on. But it's impossible for me to prove to you that a certain message has not been signed. Imagine I tell you, my neighbor never signed the number 5. And then you say, oh, your neighbor never signed the number 5, so how can you convince me that this is the case? And I never saw it. Maybe he did it in his basement. I don't know, but I'm pretty sure he never did it. So if you have a digital signature, you can prove that this is a valid document. But that a certain document has not been signed is impossible to do using digital signatures alone. But you can do it with a blockchain, because a document is either in the blockchain or it's not in the blockchain. And now, if we would agree on a novel signature scheme where the validity of the signature is decided by two factors. One is there should be a digital signature, and second is it must be in the blockchain. Then I can prove to you that my neighbor did not sign 5, because if he did with this new scheme, it should be in the blockchain, and it's not. You can look. And now, why is this a very, very valuable property? It's, for once, if I want to keep you from double spending cryptocurrencies, there you would maybe sign, oh, I give these 100 ledger dollars to Jörn, and you would sign for someone else, I give the 100 ledger dollars to Alice, and then you would obtain double the goods. But nobody would maybe see what happened, and there will be a conflict in future, and everything will be bad. With a blockchain, the transaction is valid only if it is in the blockchain, and you can see that. And if now the transaction of the 100 ledger dollars to Alice is after in the blockchain, after the 100 ledger dollars to me, then this will not be a valid transaction, because you already spent these 100 ledger dollars. So it will be seen that you kind of overdraw your account, and so Alice will not get 100 ledger dollars, and she will not give you any goods for the 100 she didn't receive. And you can imagine also other applications where this is extremely useful. For example, I was talking about the digital certificates with which you can make up a public key infrastructure. And now imagine a public key infrastructure gets partly corrupted. For example, there's one certification authority which loses the signing key. And having lost the signing key, you can now say, oh, I'm Scrooge McDuck. I have a valid certificate, and you can do all kinds of bad things. But, for example, you could claim to be Google, and you could actually pretend to be Google because you have a certificate where it says that you are Google. And now, if we do something what's called certificate transparency, you can do this with a blockchain. You could say a certificate is valid only if it is signed by a certification authority, plus it must be in the blockchain. Then Google could look through the blockchain every day, and if they see hey, there's a certificate for Google and we didn't issue this, so there seems to be something wrong. The public key infrastructure seems to be corrupted. We have to do something. And then they could revoke this certificate. And this is very nice, because actually, if you have this certificate transparency, you can be pretty sure that the certificates are not forged. They are valid, because the other party, like Google, would have revoked it if it were not valid. And unfortunately, this is not always the case, that public key infrastructures have this kind of certificate transparency, but it's also a very, very nice application. Also, sometimes they say that blockchains could be used in logistics. And then I think, yeah, and why? Why do I need a blockchain in logistics? And you could say, haha, a contract between two partners in the logistic chain is valid only if it is in the blockchain. Otherwise, it's a secret contract we are not considering valid. And then you could prove that, for example, you source only oil from small farmers. And you would say, look, those are my contracts. Those are all my valid contracts. They're in the blockchain, and they are all contracts with local small farmers. If you would use digital signatures instead, this wouldn't work, because I could have a digital signature on a contract with some other party and not telling you about it. Whereas if contracts are only valid if they are in a certain blockchain, then I could claim that, oh, these are all my valid contracts. And if now you find out that I do something else, then it's obviously cheating. And so, yeah, there might be some applications, even in logistics, where it's useful to be able to prove that you have no other contracts violating your mission to be, I don't know, helpful to local farmers. So, yes, the blockchain is a great invention. It has applications, but there were some times where people, I don't know, sold iced tea with blockchain, and this was clearly a time where it was overhyped. And maybe that's the time where I did say that for many applications, you don't need a blockchain. For many applications like iced tea, you can do it without blockchain. But still, there are interesting applications, and all those applications do have in common that you need to be able to prove that a certain thing does not exist.
Yeah, that's really interesting. From what I gathered from your answer right now, you changed your perspective a little bit. At that time, you just wanted to lower the hype a little bit, and I agree actually with you that many applications don't need a blockchain. There are some interesting applications, and I actually the supply chain question, I was like a couple of years ago looking into some projects that did supply chain, and it never occurred to me that that would be an important use case. But like you explained very good right now, it actually could be the supply chain could or the blockchain could add value to a supply chain, or I guess enhance the transparency of a supply chain, right? To really tell this good is sourced from this country and not the other country. And yeah, okay, let's pivot a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about privacy as well. What do you think generally, how has specifically digital privacy evolved over the last 20 years in your experience?
Okay, I think privacy is a big problem because we are voluntarily giving away our data for internet services, and we do not see the consequences. What does this mean? This means that a lot of people, if you ask them, will tell you they have no secrets. There is no need for privacy because they have no secrets. And I even heard this from small and medium sized companies, that we produce only these things, we have no secret. But imagine now, no small or medium sized company in Germany could keep secrets. Then, by looking at the total of the data, you would know a lot about the economy in Germany. And you would, for example, by, I don't know, the number of Mercedes stars produced. From this, you could maybe conclude how many cars are produced. So even though the small company providing those emblems are thinking, oh, we have no secrets, but in the big context, all this can be very, very sensitive. And the same is true for your personal data. Your habits give away things about your health status, about your religion, about all kinds of things which should be private, because you don't want, as an example, that large human resource management companies collect data and maybe from your internet habits know that you might be a little bit lazy, for example. Then even if you would like to change your life, even if you say, I would like to get a new job, to really get started, to change my life, it might be impossible because all those companies get in contact with this human resource management company and they tell them, looks lazy, this guy. And so there's a reason why some things should be private. And the reason is that it has consequences if it gets known. And now we are very, very bad at knowing these consequences. And we are very, very bad at keeping things private, because actually we usually think in the way it works in a village. Say, my neighbor sees when I leave the house, so it's no secret when I leave the house. But it makes a big difference if your neighbor sees it and maybe ignores it, or if the big tech companies exactly know when you leave your house. And it might even be that you have a love affair, and it might be that this love affair becomes visible in where your positions during the day are. They're like at home, at work, at this other place, and then at this other place, and then at home, at work, this other place. And so there's a reason why things should be private. And I think we are very close to losing our privacy, because you see, in Europe, we came up with this GDPR, this legislation ensuring our privacy. And what happened? I think that a lot of companies did not change the way they use the data. They just made us agree that they use the data in that way. So, to my opinion, there's a big problem here. On the one hand, we have fascinating privacy preserving technologies. So we have things like zero knowledge proofs, we have things like anonymity techniques and all that. But it's not in the interest of the big tech companies, because they earn a lot of money by using our data. And we see this now even more when it comes to large language models, which are trained on whatever information is accessible on the internet. And this is something you didn't think about before, that maybe you wrote some private essays about your dreams and your hopes and I don't know what, and put them up on the internet such that other lonely people can find them and read them and enjoy them. And now they are just part of this large language model in a way that even the legal people don't really know if this is now violating copyright or not. But I think it's something where we need to think about, because maybe these large language models know a lot about you if you are, say, present on the internet. If you say you have a podcast on the internet, and maybe there's also the technology to turn the voice into text, and then you train your large language model, and now the large language model knows a lot about you. And this is maybe not what you really want, because we don't know the consequences yet. So we are quite new into seeing large language models which are so convincing and so eloquent. but the consequences of these large language models also knowing a lot about the people who are present in the internet, we don't know what the consequences will be.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I totally agree. I think most people don't pay enough attention to their privacy because of convenience reasons, I would say. Is there any way to overcome this? Because I think that's one of the main challenges in the future. I mean, we had the privilege to grow up in a country where the companies might only get your data and do misappropriate or appropriate things with it. But there's also governments in other countries, right, which could implement regimes and discriminate based on, like you said before, religion, background, skin color, whatever. And how can we? Is there a way, in your opinion, to solve this? To be more private as an individual or as a company, and maybe keep 80% of the convenience that we have with these services right now?
Actually, I think you can be careful about your data. That's possible. You just should not agree to everything, and maybe have the slight inconvenience to select the personalized cookie setting, or maybe reject cookies at all. But I'm not sure if this will actually solve the problem. It will make the problem maybe smaller, maybe for you. But there are lots of people who know a lot about you who might not do this. So if you use, say, WhatsApp, and they kind of upload all your contacts, then it might be that you manage to keep them from uploading your contacts, which makes WhatsApp a little bit inconvenient because you don't see names, you just see telephone numbers, because they don't know what names are belong to those telephone numbers. But even if you are very, very careful yourself, maybe your neighbor has all the contacts uploaded, which are very similar to your contacts. And so I think we do have a problem here, because a problem where I don't really know how to solve it, because we do have the technology to solve it. So there's no problem to implement WhatsApp like messengers without uploading all the contacts. There's no technological problem. It's just that the way money is earned right now is by violating privacy. We see this with the large language models. They are hyped right now, and there's a lot of money flowing into these artificial intelligence things. And I think they are violating our privacy, and they do so for earning money, and they are not kept from doing this by, say, their government. So if you have states where certain things are allowed, then this has a global impact, because the companies will go there, will have their addresses there, and then they will be allowed to process the personal sensitive data. And so the problem that we have is not that we don't know how to do it. The problem is that it's not forbidden everywhere. And so the companies orient themselves towards the countries where this is allowed. And they even put pressure on other countries. For example, you could a little bit feel this when Apple came up with what's called Apple Intelligence, AI, Apple Intelligence. They said they will not roll it out in Germany because of the strong data protection regulations. And now you feel like, oh, but I would like to have it. It's very convenient to have these Apple Intelligence features. And so probably people will want it, even though in the long run it might violate our privacy legislation. And there's another example. Tesla cars are using cameras to monitor the environment, and collect lots of personal data, which is then used to train cars for autonomous driving, for example. But if this were a German car manufacturer, they would not be allowed to do so. But now it's not a German car manufacturer, and they manufacture cars violating our privacy. And now the politicians in Germany have a bad decision to make. They can say either we will not allow these CO2 friendly electric cars in Germany, even though people want to have them, or we will allow them, even though they violate the law. And now, as you see on the streets, our politicians chose to violate our data protection for the improvement of our environment and our CO2 footprint. And this shows to me already that it's not about the technology, it's about what we want and what we allow. And people do want large language models, Apple Intelligence, and Tesla cars, even though it violates our laws.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the large language models, for those who don't know what we're talking about, we are basically talking about ChatGPT for everyone. And I find myself, I use these models quite a bit because they're for some tasks very convenient. And I also know an alternative to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is the industry standard, I would say. And there is an alternative which is called Venice.ai. And this large language model is very focused on privacy. What OpenAI does, the company behind ChatGPT, they're collecting all the questions you are asking ChatGPT and even register them to your profile, so they get to know you better. So you have so they have a history of all the questions you ever asked ChatGPT in your life, which could be in the future. Like you said, we don't know the consequences of that yet. But because Venice AI, I was talking about earlier, is very privacy focused, but it's not as good as ChatGPT. So sometimes I will find myself going to Venice AI and it doesn't answer the question like I want it to be answered. And then ChatGPT comes in. I'm going back to ChatGPT and it immediately understands my question better. Yeah, it's really difficult to solve. And also the innovation dilemma you were telling us about earlier, about Tesla, it's a real challenge for the future. And I want to challenge actually anyone who says, like you were mentioning this in the beginning, people were saying, I don't have anything to hide. My question would be, okay, show me your bank statements of the last 6 months. They will say no, because they want to have their privacy.